Hello, Mike. Hello, Emin.
Hi, Emin. Hi, Kaio.
Hi, both.
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. It's really a pleasure.
So, are you an iOS developer?
Yeah, I'm an iOS developer for about 2 years now.
Awesome. How can we help you?
As soon as SwiftUI came out, because I had have some design background experience, I was right away drawn to it. But when I started working with it, I realized that all the architectural stuff that I learned for UIKit and that I was used to in SwiftUI, they either didn't work or I'm using them, but I have a sense that I'm using them in the wrong way, or there should be a better way. Or after a while, once the app starts to develop, I realize like some mistakes that I made early on. So it's really, when you work with it, I feel like really uneasy. So I'm really trying to figure out the best way, not the best, but like a more proper way to introduce architectures in SwiftUI.
All right. So you say you have a background in user experience and design.
Yeah.
Awesome. It's a great combination, development skills and UX.
Yeah. I've been like designing for iOS apps for, I've been designing for like 10 plus years. And out of those 10, like 5 plus, it was like only iOS. So after a while, I was like sick of just designing apps and like leaving the development to someone else. I was like, want to learn it and just see how the other side is doing, And then I was just drawn to it so much that I was like, okay, design is on the side. It's something that I like to do from time to time, but development, it's really, I fell in love with it. So ever since then, I'm developer first, so to speak.
Yeah.
So did you get angry with the developers if they're not following the margins, the font sizes?
Yeah, from time to time, like at first I was like, and I think designers are like very tricky people to like, designers and developers are always like clashing a bit,
Yeah.
Because like developers know that now I know a bit more how like when a change is made in the design, it's made because it works a lot better in code. But like the communication, if communication is not good between design and developer, you can have some issues. So, but even when I was only designing, at first I had some issues. Then I talked with few developers, and when they explained like why stuff should change or design should adapt or whatever, it became easier and easier. So once I switched to developer side, like some things became even more clear. Like I can't begin to describe how many different, like how instead of making like a standard table view, I was making some mishmash. I mean, design-wise, I was really making it hard for the developer. Whereas after becoming a developer, I realized that standardizing all that much easier.
Yeah, awesome.
So maybe every UX person should do a little bit of development, and every developer should do a bit of UX as well, right?
Yeah, definitely. And those people are like, whenever you see a designer that has like, doesn't need to have like developer experience, but if he's familiar with it and all that, or and vice versa, it really means a lot, especially for designers. If it's 8 pixels on the side, it really should be 8, not 9. I mean, it's for for a reason, So it's just finding that middle ground that both parties can like align on.
Yes, absolutely. Sometimes as developers are so focused on the code, we don't even notice this 1 pixel.
Yeah.
But if you show to a designer,
Yeah.
he would see like from a mile away, he can see the pixels, like it's not centered.
Are you blind?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yes.
Awesome.
True
All right,
that.
so
Yeah.
big differences from UIKit and SwiftUI. You like SwiftUI, by the way?
Yeah. While I was working with UIKit, of course, I went to storyboards right away because of that designer experience. Because I always like to see what I'm doing, and seeing it only in code made no sense to me. And but after a while, I realized that storyboards are like buggy. It's hard if you collaborate with someone and then merge conflicts. Jeez, that's like insanity. But it was really hard. And then programmatic UI in UIKit, it was like better from like a maintenance point of view, but like adding all those constraints and like activating and all that, it really made no sense. So I was like always sticking to storyboards or like skeletal storyboards with zip files and all that, and really trying to find all the different ways how I can avoid programmatic UI. But then when SwiftUI came about, I was like literally, that's the thing that I was looking for. Like I'm writing programmatic UI, but it doesn't feel like I'm struggling what to put where or anything. And it's like so interesting to when you have a view you want to make and you can see like, okay, I have a V stack, Z stack, and all that. It's a lot easier to wrap your mind around it. So really love it.
Yeah, and it's cool that you can also edit from the preview as well, right? You can edit a little bit like headings and all of that. And it's automatic. You see immediately, and especially that you can play the preview and interact with it. That's that's awesome. Yeah,
that's getting better and better. Yeah, at first it was kind of it stops working when it encounters an error, so you need to restart it from time to time. But it seems to be like more and more stable now, and so really love it.
Awesome. All right, so UIKit and SwiftUI, they have differences in how you will kind of design your UI code and how you transition data between the views and how you're going to define your view hierarchy. But in the whole architecture of the application, it shouldn't be a big difference, right? For example, we have a series here on YouTube called Professional iOS Engineering that we started in 2017 before SwiftUI existed. And we wrote a game. It was a quiz app. I don't know if you've seen it.
No.
So we built a quiz app and we followed some architectural patterns to decouple logic from the UI. In a way that as soon as they introduced SwiftUI, we were able to just swap the UI without changing any of the logic. So I recommend you watch this series. And this is pretty much what I'm going to recommend to you today. That you separate your logic from the UI framework. Thus, when the UI framework changes, it's easy to just swap the UI and you maintain the same logic. So this means that your logic side shouldn't implement observable object. It shouldn't be coupled with anything that is specific to SwiftUI. Thus, you can test it in isolation. You can develop it and maintain the logic separate from the views. So the simplest logical separation, they will give you a lot of benefits. Move logic out of the views, regardless if you're using SwiftUI or UIKit. Because with SwiftUI or even with UIKit, it's very easy to end up adding logic to a view controller in UIKit or to a view. And so you have a SwiftUI view and you end up putting a bunch of logic here because it's convenient. You can just use a bunch of wrappers that I give you now. You can even have like core data queries directly in the view. And for simple applications that will work probably fine, but it's not going to scale well. If you want to grow the app and if you work in a team of people that are working together, then you start having issues. You won't be able to test it properly. So even if you're using UIKit, usually the view controller, right, will become massive. And then you check the view controller, and there's a lot of logic that could be moved to a business logic layer, for example.
Yeah, like logic that has nothing to do with the UI. Right.
And then if you do that, and you have, for example, your logic in a different component, then you can easily either use SwiftUI or UIKit or AppKit or WatchKit. Because instead of your logic being in the controllers or your logic depending on a specific framework, you have actually the framework implementations, the views, the view controllers using your logic. That's the basic, the simplest separation, logical separation you can have, is to move logic away from views. Database queries, network requests, even like business logic, right? If you're building a game, for example. So can you talk us a little bit about the game you're building? Can you explain to us?
Yeah, that game was something that I thought of, I think, long before I even started learning to become a iOS developer. I remember I had like, I'm not sure which phone was it, but it's old, not too old, but like, and anyways, I was playing a lot of those guess the logo kind of games. And I always had a lot of fun with it, especially I was designer back then. So like logos and everything, like knowing all that was something that I like to do. So and I had this idea to have like a logo that's stretched and like you have to guess like additional level of difficulty, not only logo without other letters, but like still it can be a bit more tricky. And especially with SwiftUI with animations and all that, the way it works, it's a good fit for it. And I finally decided to. I think I have like enough knowledge to like make that game now. And then I realized that making games is a lot harder than I first realized. Like in standard apps, like news readers or timers or whatever, I mean, it's not easy, but still it has like certain logic you can follow along. But games are much more fluid and like, what if a user pressed this and then went here, and then how do you follow progress in a good manner? And I don't know, it's like even app simple as this has certain tricky areas. And yeah, so I started to build it. I did a variation of MVVM at first, then started to adapt it to some other, basically whatever I saw online, I tried to pick and choose like the best things or things that made sense just to see what works. And currently I have something that kind of works, but also I have sprinkled a bunch of app storage or user defaults. I'm saving all the values there just to see where I need all the values and where I can, where I'm calling all the values and where I'm saving them. So in the end, when I figure out like the best way to do it, I could just move all that into that logic layer that you mentioned. I mean, I didn't have an idea for a logic layer. I thought it has to be like an architecture that's like interlaced with SwiftUI, but now I see that all that logic needs to go into logic layer. That would make sense.
Yeah, it can be in the view, but then it's going to be all mixed up. A lot of responsibilities, rendering with logic, with changing state, and then it's going to be hard to even test it. You have to run the app and press buttons, and sometimes like there's a logic that if you win 100 times, 100 things in a row, then you get a medal.
Yeah.
Now, how are we going to test that? We're going to have to guess 100 times in a row to.
Yeah,
Ideally, you should move the logic away so you can test it, you can develop it without SwiftUI even in there. And then use SwiftUI previews just for the layout, right? And the view is derived from the state of the system right now. What is the state right now? I'm playing a game and I'm showing a logo, right? And then the user selects something here. How does it work? Should I just guess here?
Google. Yeah, you can.
Boom. It animates, nice.
Yeah. It should dismiss the keyboard automatically, but I'm only doing that in iOS 15 because iOS 15 has a focus for the text field, which works. But for the preview and because I didn't want to, if we worked with Xcode 13, it might crash or whatever. So I just omitted that focus state thing for the text view.
Right.
Yeah.
All right. So
yeah, I want to make a comment before about what we were saying before about the like the whole SwiftUI and architecture. Is I think it's extremely important to understand like how you perceive like if like understand the place of the UI, right? Like if you think, okay, I'm gonna build a SwiftUI app, right? Then you're almost you don't have any incentives, for like separation of concerns, for example, right? It's just like one blob, one SwiftUI app, and that's it. Like you put everything in a view and you're done, right? So that's the perception part, right? But if you say, okay, I'm gonna build an app and I'm gonna treat the UI as a separate, layer there, and I care about modularity, I care about pluggability, reusability, all that stuff. Like this triggers, I feel rather, this triggers something different. So you perceive a bit different things. Like,
I think I'm building a game, and I'm gonna use SwiftUI as the UI framework.
Yeah.
But the game is the game. SwiftUI is the detail, and you can plug a SwiftUI implementation into it, or you can completely rewrite the SwiftUI implementation, or you can use UIKit. And if you start building now your systems like this, decouple from the UI, without the logic in the UI, when there's a new framework, it's very easy for you to adapt this framework, start using it.
Yeah, that's so true. Like initially you go for the I went for the UI right away, just like build it and put everything here. And where do you put methods? I'm going to put it right here. So it's like, it really draws you, but that's a good point. Like when you think about going at it like right away, like in a separation kind of thing with that mindset, it does make all the difference, definitely.
Because what I recommend is, I really like the idea of prototyping first.
Mm-hmm.
So we even showed this in the professional iOS engineering. Before we start coding, you just write the ugliest code ever just to have something on the screen, so interact with it, and you see like, okay, that's what I want. And when you know that's what I want, then you start looking at it and coming up, okay, so I need to separate the logic here. I'm going to have some way of providing medals, and there'll be a progress bar, and start writing down the things you need to build. But you don't carry on with the prototype. You discard the prototype and you start with a new project. So prototyping is discardable. Don't try to make a prototype. Don't promote a prototype into a product.
Yeah. This is the current state, definitely. Like it's, you'll see like app storage. That says it all. I mean.
Yeah.
What do you mean? You have some app storage in the views? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I mean, it works for a prototype, and that's what I like about SwiftUI. It's so easy to prototype things and so quickly.
Yeah.
Right, but if you stop here and start keeping all this state here, it's going to be very hard to maintain. Because every time you add a new feature, you're going to add another Boolean here, you're going to add another state here, and suddenly there's cross state. If this state and this state and not that state, and then it's like, you cannot keep that in your mind. It's very, like, humans are not made to, to reason about multiple state transitions. So ideally, you should start modeling these separately, and you render the UI based on the current state. But the current state will be defined in the logic layer. There'll be a process, there'll be an event or an action that will trigger a state change. And then you send this state change to the UI, and the UI render itself again based on the new state. And it's always a state transition. And this works with UIKit as well.
Yeah.
It works with SwiftUI and UIKit as well. It's just that SwiftUI really pushes you to do that.
Yeah.
Like create your views from the current state. It's the preferred way of doing it in SwiftUI. In UIKit, you can be very stateful. You can have state in the views and so on. But UIKit is more, here you can also have state, right? Yeah. But it's going to be very hard to maintain. The framework will probably push you to find other solutions and move that to a logic layer.
Yeah.
And you can use app storage, but then use it in the logic layer, right? You can use those wrappers if it makes sense. But if you keep adding things to the view, it's going to be hard to maintain soon.
Yeah. It was already when I think for the badges and that progress bar on top, because at first I had levels, but then I didn't want to work with levels. But if user has like 5 guest logos, then he gets like a 5 logo badge, and then 10 or 15 or all cars or whatever. And that whole logic, like trying to follow that progress, and then when he gets the badge, then I reset the progress, but then save it again and all that. So, and like you mentioned, like with the state, and when the level ends, like not level, when you get the badge to present the badge and all that, I was all over the place trying to figure out, because state was here true, here was false, and then this was he canceled this action, or this logo was wrong, the fifth one, or whatever. It was so hard to connect all the dots. And that is still, like, now when I look at it again, it works, but I'm like 80% sure like why some areas work. Like I would have to go back at it again because it's so like entangled, and
Yeah, if you don't look at this code for 2 weeks, you probably forget what it's doing, and it's gonna be hard to go back to it. I mean, I wrote code like this a lot as well, and I learned my lesson. That's why I'm telling you that it might be best to move this logic somewhere else.
Yeah.
All right, so separate logic from the view. Do you have any logic in here? All right. What is this?
I posted that like as a point of interest, like as a side question or something, because I'm forwarding this. This was like a view model kind of thing. It's like observed object, which has like bunch of logic and performs some modifications to the data, and I pass it in right here, like inside, like a dependency injection kind of thing, I guess.
So this is the main OO, right? Is the observed object?
Okay. Yeah.
And it's, what is this defined?
Here. It should be, yeah.
All right.
Then it's initialized like right away.
So this is pretty much a model. It's not a view, right? Yeah. It's more like a model type that will hold some logic. Correct?
Yeah, and it's it fetches. It saves the core data and fetches from the core data, and actually data object fetches, but this communicates with the data object.
Okay.
So there's like a view.
Observable. And the child views may depend on it. You need to pass it through.
Yeah, I was trying to avoid that, but for the text field, for the main guesser text field, I had to put some logic inside the child view, basically. So all the guessing, like checking if the answer is correct or not, and all that, it's performed inside that view, which is not good, I guess. So that's why I'm.
All right. So you use state object wrapper when the view owns the state. What does it mean owns? It creates it. And you attach the lifetime of the state with the lifetime of the view. And in this case, the text field guesser is not creating, but receiving it as a dependency, right? You pass it when you create it. So here it should be observed object. So if you're receiving it and you're not creating it and you don't own it, someone else owns it and passes it to you, you use observed object. Now, if you are instantiating it, like here, then you use state object because you own it. You own its lifetime. And you attach the lifetime of this state with the main view. When the main view is destroyed, the state is destroyed. But remember that the child views may change with state changes. So here it should be observed object. It's okay to pass dependencies down the chain as well if it makes sense. But this text field guesser maybe doesn't need, what does it need the main object? Where does it use it?
Below should be when you enter the check answer, yeah, right there.
Is stretched, contains. All right. So this is logic, right? And it's in the view. Maybe you should move this logic somewhere in the model layer, like is stretched. What does it mean, is stretched?
It's the state of the view that holds the logo, like the white container on the right side, for example. So that's in the main view, and it decides like whether it's once the logo is guessed correctly, then the isThresh changes to false, so it goes to like a guessed state kind of thing. So it's like really connected to that text field is connected to everything. It's like a lot of stuff depends on it, maybe for that it should.
All right. So when the text field value changes, it checks the answer, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And check answer will perform the logic here. Okay. So logo guess is the current state of the text field, right? It's the whatever I typed here.
Yeah, that's right.
So right now this value would be AD.
It will just lowercase it and remove, because I decided it would be easiest to accept answers if it has like 2 words. I don't care if you use space or not. I just remove it, and that way I can have multiple, if someone types something with capital letters in the middle, because that's what the brand uses, I don't want to say like it's incorrect, because it is.
So here, this logic here is probably a great candidate to be moved to the model.
Yeah.
For example, where is it? Current answers. Could be something like one. Check answer, something like this. It returns a Boolean. Oops, Boolean. So let's call it guess. And then you return like this. You can test this in isolation without running the UI, right? You can instantiate this class, send a guess, and see if it's correct or not.
Yeah, nice. It seems so easy when you do it. Like, oh, just yank it from here, put it here. Like.
Something like this. And mark correct question. What does it mean?
I think it should save. It was the. Yeah, it should all the correct answered logos, like all logos that you guessed, it takes them and saves them to core data. So it knows that you saw that one already, so it doesn't pick it up again.
Right. Okay, so another thing we can do here is to move this logic here. So this is correct guess, I think. Or correct guess. You can say if is correct guess equals mark question.
Yeah.
And we don't need to return anymore.
Yeah.
What we do? This is stretched, right? But maybe this is stretched now can be a state change in the observed object. And maybe it's not is stretched, but maybe it should be something like
is guessed.
Yeah, guessed correctly, something like that. For now, just not to change too much. Yeah, we're performing some refactorings here without tests. So it's not a refactoring. We are changing code and hoping for the best.
Yeah. Before watching your videos, I would say like that was more or less standard for me. Like just change it and then see if anything breaks. Like.
Yeah, the problem is, how do you know?
Yeah.
So many things that can be affected. Like
how do you know? We need to run the app again and run enough manual steps to make sure to give us confidence that we didn't break anything.
Yeah.
Let's see. What is this logo?
You have to guess. Yeah, it is. There is, by the way, whenever for testing purposes, all logos have AA as the one possible answer, just so you don't have to like,
So the logic here was not, and this was not, correct?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that should.
This should be not. So confusing.
Yeah.
My brain is not good with booleans.
I mean, when I started it, like I kept having issues with that is stretched and just stuck there, so it's definitely need to name it something different.
All
So
right,
which just type
logo is this?
It's a Rolex, I think, but you can do just AA.
Ooh, yes. You got the point. The idea is to separate the logic from the views. And then if you're using SwiftUI or if you're using UIKit, that's just an implementation detail. It shouldn't matter. If it matters, then you're to couple with the framework. And then when there's a new framework comes to town, you need to relearn everything because it's very hard to translate the things you knew into this new paradigm.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
That's why it's another point that I make is not to build UIKit apps, not to build SwiftUI apps, but you build apps and you use UIKit or SwiftUI to deliver the user interface. Especially because in games, it's different because usually most of the logic is in the app. It's not in the backend. If you have just an app communicating with a backend that it has zero logic, it's just consuming data, then it's just like a dumb app that doesn't have much logic. But games, usually, you have all the business rules, giving medals, all this in the app. Sometimes you don't even have a backend. Or if you have a backend, it's just a storage mechanism, like CloudKit. You just store the data so it syncs with other devices so you don't lose the data, but all the logic is in the app. In this case, it's even more beneficial separate the logic from the frameworks. Don't put logic in core data models. Don't put logic in SwiftUI views or UIKit views or view controllers. Keep the logic as pure, like structs and classes. It doesn't import any framework. Just foundation if necessary. Like basic constructs. And you build all your logic there, you test it, just pure functions, input, output, state transitions, and then you might have to create a tiny view model that implements observable object and provides the publishers that SwiftUI needs to update itself. But all the logic here shouldn't even depend on combine core data or things like that, because then it's going to be much easier to maintain this application and evolve this application throughout the years with the framework changes, because SwiftUI is evolving, just like UIKit. At some point there were no collection views in UIKit, and then there were collection views. But if all your logic was in a table view controller, it would be very hard to migrate to collection views. And then there were stack views, and then there were so many other things that you keep adding and improving the framework. And if you want to be always up to date and being able to, take advantage of the new technologies, you need to decouple logic from view, from UI. Yeah. And that's what MVC tries to bring. That's what MVVM, all those patterns, they try to provide you like guidelines for this separation.
Yeah, that's like what I saw one of your videos, because I just recently learned about your courses and everything. And I was just going over the videos, trying to see like some of them which would make sense. And just today I saw one where you explained something in regards to architectures, where it's like it's not a template that you use, but just a guideline, like how you would structure your data and all that. And at that point, I was like, geez, yeah, I was literally looking at it like a template. Oh, I need to fill up this MVVM, or like this view model has to be filled up with this because this app has it. I didn't look at it from a point of view like this is like a suggestion or like an idea which you can adapt to your app the way that you see fit, not to stray from it too much, but just an idea basically, which is really important. Good way of looking at it, definitely.
Yeah, templates help if, for example, I want to build an Uber-like app, and I found an Uber-like app template already with some pre-made stuff that I'm gonna need, like a rider thing, like choose the map, and then you have a template for that specific domain problem. But just finding a generic template like Viper and trying to fit your problem into it usually doesn't bring good returns.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. I actually, when I found out about coordinator pattern, I used it literally as a template for one of the apps that I was working on at the moment, like a personal app. It was a really simple app, and I mean that back then I was like really starting out, and the coordinator pattern was like really hard for me to grasp, but I wanted to use it because I understood the idea behind it, and instead of focusing on that idea and trying to translate that into knowledge that I had at the moment, I was literally using something that wasn't at all for that kind of app. The app was way too simple to use coordinator patterns, so I ended up making a real mess. But luckily, it was a personal project, so.
Yeah, but it's awesome. Like we should make messes. Let's not be afraid of making messes. That's how we learn.
Yes.
Yeah.
Let's make messes, and then we learn.
Yeah. Like you said, like for prototype for this app, I knew that I'm not yet sure how to structure it, and I'm not sure what challenges will there be in the game, because it's the first game kind of app that I'm doing. But now I'm seeing what issues I have and what issues I have to solve before diving into just that fancy UI thing. But I have to like mess with the data and have like a good logic layer to. And I love the approach that you use with tests. I never wrote as much tests at all. It was always something I want to learn, like, but it's always something on the side, like never high priority. And I even have like one or two books about it and all that. But it was always like, oh, tomorrow. But now I see that it's really important to just try and use it wherever. Like small test, it doesn't matter. Just no matter if it just checks like some little thing, like if this function works well or whatever, but just level up that knowledge piece by piece, like no rush.
Yes, absolutely. And if you separate the logic, it will be much easier to test the logic as well. No, it's just a pure function, input, output. So I highly recommend you watch the professional series here. It's free on YouTube.
3
You
seasons.
see there, testing. We write a bunch of diagrams, how we're thinking about separating the UI from the logic, and it's all there. 3 seasons, right? Can binge watch it like Game of Thrones.
50
Nice.
More than 50 episodes, maybe. Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so you're in for a treat here.
Yeah, nice.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah, if you like it. And yes, I really like the idea of prototyping. Like, always start with like no barriers, like no tests, no architecture. Just play with ideas. When you're happy with what you found, like, okay, this is the app I want to build. This is how it's going to look. This is the kind of mechanics I want. Now let's think how we're going to do it, and then we start from scratch. You discard the prototype, or you keep it there in a separate branch, and you every now and then you go there and play around with it again. But you start from scratch with tests, separating the layers as needed. And if you have tests, like you don't need to get the perfect architecture up front. You can always refactor because it's very easy to validate that your code still works and the behavior is still the same. You just command U to run the tests. Very quickly, boom, get feedback, move on. Command U, get feedback, move on.
Yeah.
It's going to really speed up your process.
Yeah. That's one of the things that I never considered. And I think most companies or clients even look at it that way, that tests are, there's not always time for them, but in the end, they always make things faster, not slower, even though you take time to write them, but down the line, it saves time as well.
You can definitely make you slower. If you have bad tests, they can make your life worse. That's why it's important to write good tests, like that, because tests, they're not like a magic thing that would solve all the problems. Like, you need to also learn how to write good tests, and that's a skill. And if you build these skills, you're gonna have unique skills, because most developers don't build them. So you already have unique skills. You have 10 years UX experience, 2 years developer experience. Now write tests, you're gonna conquer the world.
It's very rare. Exactly. Yeah.
Seriously.
Nice. No, really, that I like that idea of like focusing on something that's important, but maybe underlooked and overlooked. Actually,
focus on the fundamentals. Like that's the important thing. Like if you wanna become better at structuring, don't look at the acronyms. Focus on the fundamentals. Like good separation of concerns, input, output. Like solid principles, this sort of dependency injection, this sort of thing, and then structure is gonna just it's gonna form on its own.
You start to click. If you follow the foundational principles, suddenly you will arrive at MVC. Suddenly you will arrive at MVVM. Those things will start popping up and start clicking. But if you look at the templates, you cannot see, between the lines. It's harder. I think it should be the other way around. Build a solid foundation, and then everything you can build on top much easily. All right. So thank you for joining us. Did we answer your questions, at least at a higher level, more conceptual level?
Yeah, definitely. Like that, the initial thing with the logic, like being on the side and not interlaced with SwiftUI, UIKit, and all that, it really does make sense. I always thought it needs to be like kind of connected, but also just one thing that you mentioned, having like a view model that communicates between logic and UI if needed, like to be like a state object or whatever. That would be kind of an adapter in a way, right?
Yes, pretty much.
Yeah.
Because SwiftUI has some requirements, like, if you want to keep this state, it needs to be an observable object, and then you can have some published properties. But this is specific to SwiftUI, right? You might not need this in other frameworks. So if you can, decouple your logic from it as well. Otherwise, your logic will start conforming to observable object, and suddenly you're just importing SwiftUI everywhere.
Yeah. True that. Awesome.
All right, so don't forget, Professional iOS Engineering Series. We wrote a quiz app, which is quite similar to what you're doing.
Exactly.
The difference is that it's multiple choice, and you select like an answer out of 4 or 5.
But the game logic is, pretty much the same.
And we implement with both UIKit and SwiftUI, so you can see both.
Nice.
In there.
And I promise I won't use it as a template. I won't skip ahead or whatever and just use it as a template, like setup. But I really want to like learn like how to understand, not just write it, but really understand what I'm writing and modify if needed.
Yeah, absolutely. So practicing is the way. We only learn by actually doing, right? If we just copy a template here and there, we're not going to learn. Maybe we're going to get an app done, but we're not going to learn.
So true.
All right. So thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Bye. Awesome. Take care.
Take care.
Bye-bye.